All right, welcome into Carps Corner. Another exciting episode. We're plowing down towards the start of free agency in the NFL, heading towards that. So that means there's a lot of moves that are going to come from rosters. There's going to have to be guys moving around. Teams have to get under the salary cap. The NFL Combine is wrapping up, and that's always fun. We get to see all the 40 overlays and watch Rich Eisen run around and look foolish as he gets slower and slower every year, as he gets older and older. So some big news, some of the big winners out of the combine, both Ohio State receivers, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, they fly. They look really good. That's back at the very beginning, and probably the guy who attracted the most attention of anybody there. Number one, because he's probably the biggest dude at the combine, beefy, large, the man in the middle for the Georgia Bulldogs, Jordan Davis. Now, my man comes in about 6'6", 345 pounds. I mean, I think he played even bigger than that. Maybe it's 350 exact weight. Heck, he looked like he weighed 370 at points this season. He's incredibly large, huge, beefy dude. And so everybody now has the overlays with him because he ran a 4.8 240. He broad jumped over 10 feet, and he did all that at his size. Now, that's a remarkable feat for a human. And so people look at that like, these are the type of linemen you need to get. Well, the problem is Bill Parcells called it the walking the earth theory. There's not that many men in the world walking the earth that are built like Jordan Davis. In fact, he's probably one of one. And so people can look around and say, hey, we need to get a guy like that, to play our scheme in college, to play on our team in the league. There aren't many dudes you're going to be able to find who move like Jordan Davis. Now, one interesting nugget about this, though, Jordan Davis, terrific run stopper. Georgia Bulldogs had the best defense in the country this year and ultimately won a national championship, riding that defense to the title. Jordan Davis played less than 20% of the snaps on third down for Georgia throughout the season. Now, yeah, some of that, might be later in games. Georgia has the game wrapped up, whatever it might be, but he wasn't really a big third down contributor for him. And so this is what scouts have to look at. General managers, coaches have to try to figure out, why was he not on third down more? They'll talk to the coaches. Well, we used him on this and that. He's a big guy. We tried to keep him rested, rotate him. You really probably didn't want him in 2-minute situations, end of half, end of game, where he's going to have to go rep after rep after rep, gets fatigued, gets tired. And so they're going to have to figure out in the NFL, like, A, can we get this guy in better shape? B, is there a reason? Why wasn't he playing on third downs? We heard the coaches at Georgia tell us this, but with all of his physical prowess and his athleticism, his size, he is incredibly explosive. He's got explosive like Aaron Donald, except for the fact he's like 60 pounds, 70 pounds bigger than Aaron Donald. Does he have that type of motor, though? Aaron Donald is a monster with that motor. And so this is what some of these coaches are going to have to figure out. How high do you draft this guy who has elite traits? So coaches look for. They look for traits, size, speed, agility, whatever it might be. And then can we take those traits and can we develop them into a better player? But sometimes there's like this disconnect from what you see on film and then what you ultimately see from players at the combine. If their traits are this, why is their production down here, or vice versa? And not that Jordan Davis didn't have great production. That's not where I'm going with this. That's something that coaches always have to ask themselves. When you have a guy like DK Metcalf who ran through the roof, obviously he had some injury problems and some stuff in college, but trying to figure out, well, why wasn't this guy just absolutely as dominant, as any receiver ever had been in college football? If this guy is going to be Larry Fitzgerald's size and, faster than him and all these other things, why wasn't he as dominant as Larry in college? So you have to figure out, some of those guys go on to be busts. Other guys, I said, go on to be DK Metcalf and play well. Where will Jordan Davis fill in this? We'll have to find that out. He has good film at Georgia. Can he be a guy that can be a better pass rusher? Can he get involved in third downs? Can he be a guy that can play in an NFL game that's probably 70 plus snaps? Can he give you 40 to 50 of those? Maybe I think that would be where you'd be looking to get him in there. You're going to obviously rotate all your defensive linemen, but can he play 2/3 to 70, maybe 75% of the game? That's going to be the goal if you're going to pay a guy a lot or you're going to draft him really high. You're going to want to see that. And he's young. As you get older, it can be even more physically demanding. So Jordan Davis, the freakazoid from the combine, absolutely tremendous. But there's going to have to be some decisions made and trying to figure out like exactly what is this guy for us? What can he ultimately be? They're going to have to figure that out at the next level in the NFL. So while players are moving in, free agency is about to start. And with that, NFL teams are trying to clean up their salary caps. Look at it like a little spring cleaning for most people. Hey, we got to look at our team, where we are good, where we are bad, where we're getting production from, where we weren't. Is there places we can restructure if we're tight on the cap? We like the guy, but can we move some money around to make sure that we like him enough that they can stay here? Or ultimately, are there guys who, you know what, they really haven't been that productive for us relative to their cost? We need to move on from them. Maybe we'll take a little, dead money hit, but we'll relieve and open up some cap space. Or they're guys that we feel need to take just a pay cut. We want to keep them here. We're not going to restructure and just push money out, but we're going to straight up ask him, hey, can we get a discount? Some big moves in Dallas with that. Jerry Jones, Stephen Jones is going to be asking for some discounts. Apparently, Amari Cooper, he might be on his way out. Brought him in, traded for him from the Raiders. Big splashy 5-year deal, $100 million. In reality, 2-year, $40 million deal. Dallas can get out of this, save a ton of cash on the salary cap. And this is the problem. They've got Dak making a ton. Really, it's Zeke making a ton as well. They have a lot of guys making a lot of money. And so Amari Cooper last year, 68 catches, a little less than 900 yards, 8 touchdowns. Good production, but I don't know if that's $20 million production. And so do the Cowboys, can they convince him to take a pay cut, to convince him to stay? Or is this a situation where they frankly just want to move on? And that happens as well. But Dallas trying to figure this thing out as they're trying to navigate and balance. They've got their quarterback in their prime. They believe that they're able to make a run. They want to try to keep these guys healthy, try to give Mike McCarthy all the tools that they need with their players to be able to have success. Is Amari Cooper going to be part of that in the future? I don't tend to believe that he will be at this point. Just looking at it, I feel like they'll probably release him and move on. That's what I believe Adam Schefter was reporting last week on Friday. More news out of Dallas. DeMarcus Lawrence, who unlike Amari Cooper has been really productive the whole time. He's been there. People are going to look at what he's done. He's been a leader of that defense. And until Micah Parsons got there, he was the dude on that defensive side of the ball. He is a tempo setter for you, a bell cow, whatever term you want to use. He has been that guy. And so that's why, they franchise tag him. They tried to tag him twice, ended up ultimately getting the deal done. Sends a 5-year, $105 million deal. And the way that got done, if you remember back, DeMarcus Lawrence, he had to ratchet up a little bit, kind of weaponize his shoulder injury. And hey, if you're going to franchise me, I'm going to wait to have this shoulder injury looked at, wait to have the surgery. So I'm not going to play the entire season if this is how it's going to work out. Jerry ultimately acquiesces and they get that deal done. Now, DeMarcus Lawrence, they're trying to figure this out. He was hurt last year. He comes back the final 6 games, really productive, 3 sacks, but a ton of quarterback pressures, PBUs, a ton of things that he can provide. He's making $19 million. They asked him to take a pay cut. No, sir. He declined it. And so now this puts the onus on Dallas. DeMarcus Lawrence declines the pay cut, and now it goes back to Dallas for a guy who's been really productive. Injured last year, broke his foot, but it was back and looking good, the last 6-7 games of the season. And so Dallas is going to have to figure this out. We've got Micah Parsons here. We feel like we're moving in the right direction there. We've drafted him. We're building this thing around. We let go of Jalen Smith last year, moved on from him. We're trying to clean up our defense. We're right in our prime. And so do you really want to let a guy like this go? If you're Jerry Jones, do you really want to let DeMarcus Lawrence go? Is it that important that you get that much cap relief for a guy who's been as productive as he has, both on and off the field? Guy's been a leader for you over his tenure with the Cowboys. He's a homegrown dude, a developed player, for the Cowboys, is the relief that important? Because he stood up to you and said he won't take a pay cut, and he could get a lot of money on the open market. And so now the ball is back in the Joneses' court to see ultimately what they're going to do. The power play by DeMarcus Lawrence. We'll see if it pays off for him. Za'Darius Smith, Green Bay Packers, similar situation, except for the fact he was hurt all last year. Signed a big deal. They brought him in, was playing really at a high level. And then last year, you looked how good the Packers defense was. Pretty darn impressive. And it was impressive without Za'Darius Smith on the field. Came back, final game, had the back issue. And this is what Green Bay is up against. They've been restructuring guys as they can left and right. They're starting to get to the start of free agency. Aaron hasn't told him what he's going to do yet. They've got to figure out if they're going to franchise Davante Adams. They're going to keep him. They're going to be able to get a deal done with him, whatever that's going to look like. But in doing so, they have to clean up cap space. And because of that, Za'Darius Smith, he's probably going to be a cap casualty. They're going to release him, $16 million in cap savings. They're going to need that money because the cap number for Davante Adams on a franchise tag is going to be about 18.5. It's going to be up there. And so can they keep him and find a way to keep Adams? That's the franchise cap number for the wide receivers this year. And so it's going to be difficult trying to mash that together unless you do this. And the good news for Green Bay is they were able last year to get a look at their defense without Za'Darius Smith. He was one of their big free agent signings a couple off seasons ago, came in and was very good, but they got to see him without him. The defense still held up. And so he'll go somewhere else. Will he be able to return to that form that he had earlier? Well, that remains to be seen. Good player. I think he's still going to be productive, but Green Bay had to do this if they want to try to be effective and be able to get Aaron under contract should he want to come back and be able to get Davante Adams back as well. And then lastly, one other cap casualty just coming down on Monday. Kyle Vanoy released, Patriots saving $5 million. It wouldn't shock me if he ultimately maybe re-signs there later. Wouldn't be stunning at all, but I think the Patriots doing him a solid. Free agency's getting ready to start. Hey, we're going to open this up for you, give you a week, figure out, a way to see if you can get signed somewhere else. If not, maybe we'll come back. But Patriots also trying to clear some cap space, have been far more active in free agency, since Tom Brady left. We'll see if New England continues that run of free agent activity, if they continue to go out and try to spend and build their roster in an aggressive way through free agency, or if they do like they did for so long and develop through the draft and then find those value buys in free agency, which is how they built, those first three Super Bowls in 4 years, with not the splashy signings, but more the value guys that were under the radar. New York Football Giants, they've got a problem. Drafted Saquon Barkley, top 5 draft pick, 4 years ago. Really talented player out of Penn State. Came in his first year, set the world on fire. Saquon has 2,000 yards from scrimmage. Since then, a little bit underwhelming. Has the ACL injury, hasn't been great. And a lot of that has to do with the offensive line play and maybe the quarterback play a little bit in New York as well. Daniel Jones has been up and down, I think, and a lot more down than up. I think you can attribute a lot of that to poor offensive line play, the same way you can attribute that to Saquon Barkley. He has $7.2 million guaranteed on his deal this year. He's getting that regardless of whether he's on the team or not. So the Giants aren't going to cut him. It wouldn't make any sense for that. He's played well when he's been healthy. But if you're the Giants, you have to start asking yourself, is he going to make our team better this year? We've got an entirely new front office, new coaching staff. They're looking at the long-term plans. Can we get some assets for this guy? He could help us win. He's still a talented player, but is he going to be in the plans long-term for us? Is by the time we'll be good and feel like we're ready to go compete, where will Saquon Barkley be at in his career? If it's 3 years down the road, are we prepared, to take on a 5th-year option? Are we prepared to give him an extension? A franchise tag, whatever that looks like, to continue to pay the fare for him? Or do you float him on the trade market and see if there's a team out there that offensively is pretty good? You're going to get a really talented running back to be able to come in, a dual threat guy, can catch it, can run it, and is explosive. And when he's healthy, if you have a good offensive line, we can really do some great things for you. And I think that's where the Giants are at right now, trying to look around and trying to figure out, hey, maybe we should get him out of here. Only had 600 yards rushing last year. Like I said, that was at 13 games. It was behind an offensive line that was one of the worst in the league. And so if you give him an offensive line that's better, will that ultimately help him? I think it probably will. And so I think that's why they're trying to move on from him now and see if they can trade. I don't believe that they're cut him. There'd be no value really to him doing that since his salary is guaranteed. But I think if they can find a trade partner, a team that's closer to winning and maybe just needs a running back, and maybe the Giants, for them to try to get some compensation back, since $7 million is a lot to pay a guy who's been injured and it's all guaranteed. So the team's on the hook for it. If they trade, Giants may have to pay a little bit of that fare. They may have to take a little bit of the edge and say, hey, we'll pay a couple $1,000,000. We'll get him down to $4 or $5 million, more of the free agent running back market. And then you can go from there, since we're going to want some decent draft compensation and his contract is on its way to being expired. So probably the plan, probably the best solution for the New York Football Giants. Tyrann Mathieu, looking like he's going to be out in Kansas City. Expected to hit free agency. I think he wants to go back. He's been a really good player for a number of years. It's amazing how he's transformed himself after coming out of LSU and, getting basically kicked off the team, struggling. Obviously had failed drug tests. He had all these issues. He's been a pretty model player in the NFL. Cares about football, plays hard. His team loves him. Teammates love him. This is the thing the Chiefs are going to start going through right now. They've been to 4 straight AFC championships. And this is what's happened. They're going to start getting older. You've got Pat Mahomes under contract. You've made the decision. Travis Kelce, he's starting to get a little bit older, but you have Tyreek Hill, really talented player, obviously, in the slot. Like, you have your guys who you're going to keep. At some point, you're going to start getting older. Defensively, you're starting to see it now. Tyrann Mathieu, right there. You made a decision to re-up and sign Chris Jones. Really, really solid defensive lineman. He is the linchpin of that defense. Mathew is one of the leaders of that defense. Those guys work really well front end to back end of keeping that thing together. But the Kansas City Chiefs are going to have to start making some decisions and letting some guys walk. And this is what happens when you're really good. And you've gone to 4 AFC championships. You've won a Super Bowl. You've been to 2 of them. You have your quarterback locked down for the future. But eventually, after 4 or 5 years, 6 years of getting in that window and getting in that run, then you have to start remaking it again. Because that's, for most players outside of the quarterback and outside of your elite stars, those guys, you're not going to be able to re-sign them all. Some of the guys are going to start to get older, and you're not really going to want to maybe bring them back at the big number that they could get on the open market. And maybe they don't necessarily want to take a discount. But this is what the Kansas City Chiefs are going to be going through here for the next year or two, is trying to find a way to start to remake and renovate. We saw it with the offensive line last year. And they ultimately bring in Orlando Brown, trade for him, and he starts filling that in as they let Schwartz go, and they start to remake that offensive line, both through free agency and in the draft. Now they're going to have to start doing this on the defense. And this is just part of the process in the NFL. Nothing stays together forever. And that's why when you see these teams, losing the playoffs, the players are so emotional because they know how hard it is to get back to that point. And on top of that, they understand that these teams are fleeting. The next year, it's not going to be the same team. The Bucs, what they did to run it back, it's very rare for that to be able to happen. And so you start to see some of these leaders, young guys coming up to hit free agency. They're not going to get paid. Team can't pay everybody. And so this is where the Kansas City Chiefs are right now, is trying to retool, because it's not a rebuild when you have Pat Mahomes. It's a retool as they continue to move along this process with their quarterback starting to get up there a little bit in age. Or not get up there in age, the rest of the team around him starting to age a little bit and figuring out what they want to do. Tyrann Mathieu ultimately hitting free agency. Lamar Jackson. Not the best season for Lamar Jackson last year. Had some injury stuff, had some COVID stuff, battled a couple different things. Underwhelming season for the Ravens as they were decimated by injury. Running backs galore were hurt. The fact that they were hovering around 500 it was an unbelievable testament to what they were able to do and how good of a coach John Harbaugh is. When Lamar Jackson's out, Tyler Huntley played pretty well, looked good, got some wins for him. But Lamar Jackson now, is coming up on the fact that, he's got his $23 million fifth-year option coming up. You look at some of the other guys who, were drafted around the same time that he was. You got Josh Allen getting his $43 million. You've got Mahomes, who's got paid already. Deshaun Watson, he's already been paid. Baker Mayfield, I don't know if the Browns are going to pay him or not. They're not this year. Some of the other guys in that class, Josh Rosen, he's already out. I mean, you look around and you see like, hey, Sam Darnold, he's already moved teams. But, Baker Mayfield, Lamar Jackson, he's won an MVP. He's been really good. He's had his team in the playoffs. Now, he hasn't had that type of playoff success yet. But the fact that he doesn't have a lot of dialogue going on with the Baltimore Ravens about getting an extension done, it's crazy town. Now, something we need to know and make sure that everybody understands this. Lamar Jackson doesn't have an agent. And so when that happens, for guys that are negotiating their second big deal, unless it's really, really easy to do and you can check a box and be like, hey, this guy matches up easily with him, there is some nuance that the agent can provide. And also the agent can gauge what's going on elsewhere in the market. Now, the good thing for Lamar Jackson is that he's a quarterback. And so if you're really good, the team wants to keep you. He has a lot of comps out there. Josh Allen got $43 million a year. His contract should look very similar to Josh Allen's. It's surprising that they let it get this far and get this long into his deal, with the fact that guys in the NFL always want that security. They want paid sooner rather than later. Why is that? Well, because of the injury element. And we're seeing that right now happen with Kyler Murray. He's battling it. Baker wants a new deal. Josh Allen got his. And here's the one thing. If you look at the way Lamar Jackson plays, he takes a lot of hits. You would have thought that he would have been pushing to get that deal done immediately after Josh Allen got his. Hey, he's at 43, maybe 44, 45, whatever. You win the negotiation, you win the structuring because you've had a little more success than he has. But now Josh Allen had some looked really good in the playoffs, battling Pat Mahomes and losing not because of his own fault, but losing just for not having the ball at the end. But Lamar Jackson, if he's going to be the long-term answer for the Ravens, like, are they going to franchise him? Like, very rarely do you see quarterbacks get franchised. And if they do, usually the deal always gets done beforehand. So they've got to figure this thing out quickly in Baltimore. And if Lamar Jackson wants to play this thing out and, hey, I'll take a franchise tag, then I'll take a second franchise tag, and then they won't be able to franchise me. I'm a pretty young dude. I'll be hitting my 8th year and finishing my 7th and going out to free agency. If that's his plan, then okay, so be it. But the way he plays football, it's risky for him to risk continuing to play without that long-term deal. Because if he loses his legs and his elite speed and athleticism, he can still be a good quarterback, but he'll no longer be the great one. So he needs to be able to have that, to be able to move forward and get that contract. They need to get to the table now. And if I'm Lamar Jackson, I'm beginning to push as we're starting this free agency period to see if in the next week we could maybe get an extension done. So that way the team knows what they're working with. They'll have a stable cap for the next 5-6 years. And Lamar then gets that security, but maybe he doesn't want it. And maybe he wants to try to go year by year, which is kind of the NBA mantra now. But the difference is with the NBA, the injury rate is significantly less. And the way Lamar Jackson plays quarterback, he needs that athleticism currently. There may be a day where he doesn't, but right now he needs that elite athleticism if he's going to be paid at the level he wants to get paid. Tag season in the NFL is here. Tuesday, 4:00, tags have to be in. Bengals reportedly going to tag Bates. Chiefs reportedly going to tag Orlando Brown. Browns reportedly going to tag David Njoku, who tight end for them, who looked like he was on his way out, a season and a half ago, and now all of a sudden maybe getting back into the good graces. Does Green Bay tag Devontae Adams? Do the Titans tag their linebacker Harold Landry? Davante Adams' tag is going to be part and parcel with Aaron Rodgers. And I've been saying this over and over again. If Aaron Rodgers doesn't come back, I don't know the purpose of having Davante Adams at a massive cap number, especially if you don't have a long-term deal done. And even if you can get that long-term deal done with Davante Adams, if you're not going to have Aaron Rodgers, I don't know if he's going to be the most amicable to deal with on a week in and week out basis anyway. And you'll probably end up having to trade him at some point in the future because he's not going to want to play in Green Bay without that man. So they've got to figure out what Aaron's doing. Aaron said he didn't want this to drag on a long time. But also with him saying that, he's under no obligation. There's no timeline for him to inform Green Bay of when he wants to return. Green Bay said they're not going to pursue trades until he tells them that he doesn't want to be there. And so this puts Green Bay in a predicament. Maybe he says something on Tuesday. Maybe he doesn't. It would be better for the franchise, obviously, if he did. So they could make a decision on Adams, on what they want to do, make a decision on what else they're going to do in free agency, who they're going to restructure, who they're going to release. They've already started clearing up some of that space. I think Green Bay is anticipating Aaron Rodgers' return. I think he ultimately goes there, but there's reports that he's torn. I think Denver has a lot of appeal to it for a guy like Aaron. Maybe he could even go out to a place like San Fran, go back to the Bay where he's from. But ultimately, if he goes to the AFC West, you look at that division, that thing is stacked. And not that he's afraid of it, but you have to look at your pathway to ultimately win a Super Bowl. I think Aaron Rodgers wants to win a Super Bowl. And if he does, he's going to need to be able to have a path to win the division because that's the only way you can get the number one overall seed. And if you look at it in the West, it is loaded up. You've got Mahomes, you've got Herbert, both really good players, out West. And Derek Carr ain't bad. The Raiders made the playoffs. So there's a lot there as well that they're going to have to be dealing with. Promise I get some combine stories. We're up against it, running out of time. I will tell you some good combine stories, and we'll get into some of those next week or later this week. I promise you that as we go through this. So enjoy it. That's it for this edition of Carps Corner. Talk to you soon.